Hey guys, this is the introduction for Unit 3, the Literature of Civil Rights. This will be the first thing that we do in the new semester, so starting in January/early February. Interestingly enough, February is also Black History Month. Weird. Huh, I didn't plan that. This unit is about the works that were written during the Civil Rights Movement, and our essential question for this unit is, how can words inspire change? Now, our whole class readings for this are going to look a little differently. There's two speeches by Martin Luther King Jr. One is the I Have a Dream speech. The other is him reading from his letters from a Birmingham jail. Then the next is Robert Kennedy's remarks on the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. So instead of reading it all together, you're going to watch those speeches and do a kind of compare-contrast and compare Martin Luther King Jr.'s two speeches to each other. What are similar things? What are different things? And then when you're listening to Robert Kennedy, what is he saying? How are his words also changing the nation? There are also questions at the end of each selection in your book, so make sure that you're checking in the textbook, answering those questions, sending them to me. But also please write your comments in the discussion question, or be prepared to share them in class, or be ready to do both if you are so inclined. All right, our opening for this unit, introduction, how can words inspire change, comes to us from 1863, the year that changed everything. In 1865, the 13th Amendment to the 1963, the year that changed everything. In 1865, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution ended slavery. Nearly a year later, African Americans continued to struggle for equality under the law. This is on page 254 in your text, or at the very beginning of the Unit 3 PDF. A number of major events in this dramatic battle took place in 1963. In April of that year, from behind the bars of a jail cell in Birmingham, Alabama, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote a message that would inspire countless others. King had been arrested for breaking a law banning public protest. His message, the famous letter from a Birmingham jail, defends nonviolent resistance to injustice. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, King wrote. He added, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. In early May, the young people of Birmingham took King's message to heart. Disobeying a court order, more than 1,000 African-American students marched from 16th Street Baptist Church. The next day, the students marched through Kelly Ingram Park. They were met by an angry white mob as well as police who blasted them with water from fire hoses and terrified them with dogs. The teenagers were jailed in temporary cells at the county fairgrounds. On the 7th day of the Children's Crusade, city officials agreed to negotiate with the African-American community. A few days later, the two sides reached an agreement to end local segregation. News of the Children's Crusade spread in the media, helping to transform the way Americans saw the civil rights movement. The Children's Crusade then had it. The New York Times ran more stories about civil rights in the 2 weeks after the Children's Crusade than it had in the previous 2 years combined. Scenes of children under attack were filmed and broadcast all over the world, setting off a global outcry. Polls showed Americans across the land believed racial injustice was the nation's biggest problem. The struggle for civil rights continued to be marked by violence. On May 28, 1963, 4 African-American college students in Jackson, Mississippi, were assaulted for sitting at a segregated lunch counter. 2 weeks later, on June 12, an assassin killed civil rights activist Medgar Evers outside his home in Jackson. That summer brought a landmark event in civil rights history. That was the March for Jobs and Freedom that took place in Washington, D.C. on August 28th. Under the shadow of the Lincoln Memorial, Dr. King delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech to a crowd of 200,000 people from all walks of life. The peace and hope of that event did not last long. On September 15th, a bomb exploded inside Birmingham's 16th Street Baptist Church. The attack killed 4 little African-American girls and injured 22 other people. The struggle continued through 1963. The Southern Regional Council has records of protests that took place in more than 100 southern towns. Approximately 20,000 demonstrators were arrested. With words and actions, they delivered a demand for justice that could not be ignored. So watch those 3 videos and do your compare and contrast. Answer, please, the questions on page 256 and 257 about this reading. And have a wonderful day. Cav out.